They mocked humanity until the ship we never acknowledged shattered their fleet. At least, that was how the news told it. For Elias Ward, it wasn't just a story of battle and ships. It was about a person he hadn't spoken to in years. Someone he wished he could talk to again. Her name was Mara Chun. She had been his closest friend during the academy years. They'd trained together, dreamed together, and stayed up late in the simulator bay, imagining what humanity could be among the stars. But 3 years ago, Mara had accepted an assignment beyond the Sol system, a research post in the Centauri cluster. At first, they had sent long messages to each other, catching up on everything. Then, the gaps between replies grew longer. Eventually, they stopped altogether. Elias told himself it was because of the distance. Light years weren't easy to cross, even for words. But the truth was, he didn't know if she even wanted to hear from him anymore. The war with the Virik changed everything. 1 week ago, the Alien Council had humiliated humanity during open session. Delegates laughed at Earth's outdated ships, the way a predator laughs at harmless prey. Elias had been there, standing in the shadows of the chamber, listening as they called humans fragile traitors, who survived only because stronger species allowed it. He hadn't spoken up. He was just a liaison officer, not a politician. But inside, their words burned, not just for himself, but for all the people. He knew back home who worked every day to make humanity better. People like Mara, who had dedicated her life to research and progress. When the Virik fleet appeared on long-range sensors, fear spread quickly. Every analyst said Earth wouldn't survive an hour if they attacked. The Alien Council didn't even bother sending warnings. They expected humanity to fold. But deep under Luna's surface, hidden in the quiet rock, there was a secret. Elias had known about it for years, but even he had never seen it with his own eyes. The Aegis Dawn. The Aegis had been humanity's hidden project for decades. A ship built in silence, funded in pieces, disguised in research budgets. While the galaxy laughed at human toy ships, engineers and scientists had been building something the universe wasn't ready for. That morning, Elias received the order to report to Dock Theta 9. The sealed doors opened, and for the first time, he stood before the Aegis Dawn. It was beautiful. The hull gleamed with an alloy that bent light in strange ways, almost vanishing against the blackness. He felt the low hum of its hybrid drive, human ingenuity fused with alien tech. Stolen, traded, or adapted. The moment he stepped aboard, he thought of Mara. She would have loved this. She would have walked the corridors in awe, tracing the walls with her fingertips, asking a million questions. She had always believed humanity's greatest strength was not our weapons, but our ability to imagine more than anyone else thought possible. But now, imagination would have to be our shield. As the Virik fleet entered Neptune's orbit, every defense station readied for a battle they thought they'd lose. The Aegis Dawn remained cloaked, silent in the darkness beyond Pluto. Inside, Elias stood on the bridge, surrounded by a crew who understood what was at stake. The comm officer's voice trembled. "Sir, they've issued final terms. Full surrender or destruction." Elias stared at the display. Dozens of enemy ships, shields glowing like burning suns. He thought about Mara again, somewhere out there in the Centauri cluster, maybe looking at her own news feed, maybe thinking this was the end for humanity. He wanted to tell her, "Don't give up on us. Don't give up on me," but there was no time for messages. Only action. When the cloak dropped, the Virik's formation faltered. They had never seen a ship like this. Their scanners screamed with conflicting readings. Too much power, too much speed, nothing made sense. The Aegis fired once. One enemy battleship split in two, molten debris scattering into the void. Then another beam, and another ship was gone. Ivirik tried to respond, but the Aegis danced between their fire, its drive bending space in sudden, impossible turns. On the bridge, Elias gave quiet orders, his voice steady, but his chest tight with something more than adrenaline. Every ship they destroyed meant more time for Earth, more time for people like Mara to live their lives without chains, and maybe more time to find the words he hadn't said. Hours later, half the Virik fleet was gone. Their flagship broke formation, signaling retreat. Elias let them go. The galaxy would talk about this battle for centuries. The day the species they mocked stood unshaken and sent their strongest running. But when the cheers began on the bridge, Elias didn't join in. He stepped to the observation window, watching the enemy vanish into the stars. Somewhere far beyond them, in a different corner of the galaxy, Mara was alive. He didn't know if she still thought of him. But now, he had something to tell her, that humanity was not what they believed, that we were worth believing in, that we could fight and win. They mocked humanity until the ship we never acknowledged shattered their fleet. And for the first time in years, Elias felt like maybe, just maybe, he could reach across the distance and find her again. Asterisk, the battle was over, but the war inside Elias's heart wasn't. The Aegis Dawn drifted silently near Pluto's orbit, its hull glowing faintly from the heat of combat. Reports of victory spread fast across every channel, but Elias hardly listened. The galaxy now saw humanity differently, strong, capable, not to be mocked again. Yet, all he could think about was someone light years away who didn't even know he was here. Mara Chun. Her name kept echoing in his mind. After the battle, the crew was granted a few hours of rest. Most went to the mess hall, laughing over warm meals and replays of the enemy's retreat. Elias, however, walked the private comms room. The walls were lined with secure transmitters, each connected to deep space relays. It smelled faintly of metal and ozone. He sat at the console, opened the long-range message screen, and stared at the empty input box. His hands hovered over the keys. He wanted to tell Mara everything. How humanity had faced an overwhelming force, and won. How the Aegis Dawn, the ship they'd once dreamed of building, was real, and he had commanded it in battle. How, when the enemy fled, he thought of her first, but the words didn't come. Where would he even start? Hi, Mara. I know we haven't spoken in 3 years, but I just helped save Earth from destruction. It sounded absurd. And worse. Maybe she wouldn't reply at all. Instead, he pulled up an old message from her, one of the last she'd sent, before they lost touch. Elias, I think we're heading to the far side of the cluster soon. I'll send you the coordinates when we arrive. Don't forget about me, okay? He remembered reading that line years ago and smiling. Back then, it felt impossible that he could ever forget her. But time and silence had a way of making even the strongest connections fade. He didn't know if she had changed, if she had someone else now, or if she even thought about Earth anymore. Still, in the quiet of the comms room, he whispered, I didn't forget, Mara. I never could. The days after the battle were filled with repairs and debriefings. The Aegis Dawn returned to Luna Base under strict orders. No public appearances, no interviews, no leaks. The ship had to remain a secret. That meant Elias couldn't tell Mara the truth, even if he found the courage to reach out. But maybe he didn't have to tell her everything. Maybe he just had to let her know he was still here. That humanity was still here. He began drafting a message. It was simple. Hey, Mara, it's been a long time. I hope you're safe. I wanted you to know Earth is doing better than anyone thought we could. We're stronger now. If you ever feel like coming home, you'll see it. He hesitated before sending it. His finger hovered over the transmit button for almost a full minute. Then the console beeped, a reminder that the next deep space relay window was closing in 30 seconds. He pressed send. 2 weeks passed before he heard anything. By then, the Aegis had been stripped, cleaned, and hidden in its underground dock. The crew went back to their regular duties, as if the greatest battle in human history had never happened. The galaxy's official reports called it a small skirmish that the Virik had withdrawn from for strategic reasons. No mention of the Aegis Dawn. Elias was eating alone in the mess hall when his wrist beeped. A priority message. He opened it and froze. Mara-chun. Incoming. Transmission. Her face appeared on the small screen, grainy but unmistakable. She looked older, a little more tired, but her eyes were still bright. "Elias," she said, and even hearing his name in her voice made his chest tighten. "I don't know if you expected me to reply. Honestly, I almost didn't. But your message, it meant something. I don't know what's happening back home, but I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad Earth is okay." She hesitated, as if unsure whether to continue. Then softly she added, "I miss those days at the Academy. We thought we could change the galaxy back then." The message ended there. No coordinates, no clear invitation to keep talking. But it was more than Elias had dared hope for. That night, he sat in his quarters, staring out at the pale blue curve of Earth through his window. The world looked so peaceful from up here, no hint of the dangers lurking just beyond the stars. He thought about Mara's words. We thought we could change the galaxy. Maybe they still could. For the first time since she left, he felt something shift inside him, a spark of hope. The Virik had learned not to underestimate humanity. Maybe it was time he learned not to underestimate the possibility of... Elias had almost memorized Mara's last message. It wasn't long, but he kept replaying it. The way she paused before saying she missed the Academy days, the softness in her voice. It felt like a bridge, thin but real, stretching across. The light years between them. Now, weeks later, he was in the middle of a routine briefing when his wrist beeped again. The encrypted code flashing on the screen wasn't the usual fleet traffic. It was a civilian channel, and it was Mara. He excused himself quickly and slipped into a quiet hallway. Heart pounding. Her face appeared again, but this time her expression was tense. "Elias, I don't have much time," she began, her voice rushed. "We've had trouble here in the Centauri cluster. There's been a raid. Not pirates, something bigger. The local defense stations can't hold them back." She glanced over her shoulder before continuing. "I'm safe for now, but I don't know how long. I just wanted to..." The signal cut out abruptly, replaced by static. Elias stood frozen, the silence heavy around him. The Aegis Dawn was hidden under Luna's surface, under strict orders never to deploy without High Command's approval. No one outside the project knew it existed. Officially, humanity's public fleet couldn't travel fast enough to reach Mara's sector before it was too late, but the Aegis could. The logical part of him told him to file a report, to let the chain of command decide. But the thought of Mara in danger, alone in some distant station, gnawed at him. The last time he'd seen her in person, they had been young cadets with nothing but dreams. Now, years later, he finally had a chance to reach across the distance, but only if he broke every rule that kept the Aegis in the shadows. That night, he sat in his quarters, staring at the faint curve of the moon through his viewport. He remembered their late-night talks at the Academy, when Mara would say, "The galaxy's too big to wait for someone else to make the first move." Back then, she'd meant exploring, building, learning. But now, those words felt like a challenge. He opened the COM system and searched for her transmission data. It had come from a station near the outer edge of the Centauri cluster, farther. and most ships could travel without weeks of preparation. But the Aegis could make it in days. Still, he hesitated. One wrong step could expose the ship, risk Earth's safety, and possibly end his career. But if humanity had taught the galaxy anything after the Viric battle, it was that we protect our own dot by morning. Elias had made his decision. He walked into the Aegis Dawn's hidden dock, where the crew was scattered on maintenance duty. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Arlen, looked up from a console. "Captain, I thought we were grounded for the next month." "We are," Elias said, keeping his voice low. "Unless we have a training exercise." Arlen raised an eyebrow. "And where would this exercise be?" Elias tapped the coordinates into a portable display. Arlen's eyes widened. "That's beyond fleet range. What's out there?" Elias didn't answer directly. "Someone who needs us. And if we do this right, no one will even know we left." The Aegis Dawn slipped from its underground berth like a shadow, its cloak active before it even cleared lunar orbit. In the quiet hum of the bridge, the crew settled into their stations. Elias felt a strange calm settle over him, the kind that came not from certainty, but from knowing the risk was worth it. They jumped into faster-than-light transit, the stars smearing into streaks of silver. Elias stood at the forward window, thinking about Mara. Was she watching the sky right now, hoping someone would come? Or had she already given up? He didn't know. But he knew she had once believed in humanity's ability to surprise the galaxy. He intended to prove her right again. 3 days later, they emerged from FTL, just outside the Centauri cluster. Distress signals were clear now. Multiple stations reporting attacks from an unidentified fleet. They weren't Viric ships. Their design was jagged, almost predatory, built for raiding and fear. Elias scanned for Maros Station and found it's still intact, but heavily damaged. Shields were failing. He didn't wait for orders. "Helm, bring us in. Weapons ready. Cloak up until we're in position." The attackers didn't see the Aegis until it was too late. A single gravitic pulse crippled their lead ship, sending it drifting. 2 more followed, each falling to weapons they couldn't track. Within minutes, the surviving raiders scattered, jumping to hyperspace without even trying to fight. The comm officer turned. "Captain, incoming hail from the station." Elias took a deep breath, put it through. Mara's face filled the screen, her hair messy, her expression a mix of shock and relief. "I don't know who you are, but you just saved us," she said. Then her eyes narrowed slightly, studying him. "Elias? Is that you?" He almost smiled. "It's me. Long story. Are you safe?" She nodded slowly. "For now, but how?" "No, wait. I know you can't tell me everything. I didn't think anyone could get here in time. Humans are full of surprises," he said. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the years of distance between them feeling a little smaller. They couldn't stay long. The Aegis Dawn was never meant to be seen by civilian or alien eyes for more than a fleeting moment. After transferring emergency supplies and repairs to Maros Station, they cloaked again and slipped away into the dark. Back on the bridge, Arlen gave him a knowing glance. "Worth it?" Elias didn't hesitate. Every second. When they finally returned to Luna Base, no one in high command asked questions. The Aegis's systems had hidden their journey so well, it was as if they'd never left. Elias sat alone later, drafting another message to Mara. This time, the words came more easily. "I'm glad you're safe. I can't explain everything, but know this, no matter how far you are, you're not alone. Humanity will always protect its own." He sent it before he could second-guess himself. Somewhere out there, Mara would read it. And maybe she'd understand that distance, even light years of it, couldn't erase what they once had. Because if humanity could shatter the fleet of those who mocked them, then maybe, just maybe, two people could bridge the gap between them two. Asterisk the Aegis Dawn was back under Luna's surface, hidden away as if it had never crossed half the galaxy to save a single outpost. For the crew, life returned to routine maintenance drills and silent corridors. For Elias, life returned to waiting for Mara's reply. Every day. After duty, he checked his secure comms. Nothing. It wasn't unusual. Messages to the Centauri cluster took weeks to travel. Still, the silence was heavy. He replayed their brief conversation during the rescue in his mind. The way she had looked at him, surprised, but somehow familiar, like a piece of the past she hadn't expected to find again. But he also remembered something else, the tension in her face, the damage to the station behind her. Whatever had attacked them might not be finished. 2 weeks later, a message came through. He saw her name and froze before opening it. Her image appeared, clearer this time. Elias, I've been thinking about everything. She looked down, briefly, then back at the screen. The station's holding for now, but I can't stop wondering what would have happened if you hadn't come. And I don't know if I want to be out here anymore. Maybe it's time I came closer to home. Elias leaned forward unconsciously. You mean? She gave a small smile. Not Earth, not yet. But maybe one of the inner colonies. Somewhere. We could talk more, see each other again, maybe. The screen froze for a moment before the final part of her message played. I'll let you know once I've decided. Just don't disappear on me this time. The transmission ended. For the first time in years, Elias felt something he hadn't dared feel with Mara before. Possibility. But with that came a quiet fear. The Aegis Dawn was a secret. His missions would always be in the shadows. How could he build anything real with someone who couldn't know the truth about his life? Still, she had opened a door. And he wasn't going to let it close without trying. While Elias wrestled with these thoughts, the galaxy was already reacting to the Centauri incident. The raiders who had attacked Mara's station had vanished after the Aegis drove them off, but reports said they were regrouping. Other species were watching closely, some out of curiosity, some out of suspicion. Humanity had always been underestimated. The Virik had learned the hard way not to make that mistake. But the more humanity acted beyond its apparent limits, the more attention they would draw. And that could put Mara in danger again. A week later, Elias received a classified briefing from Fleet Command. Captain Ward, we've identified movement in the Centauri sector. The raiders are back, and they've taken hostages from 3 civilian stations. We're sending public fleet ships, but the Admiral hesitated. They'll arrive too late to make much difference. Elias didn't need to hear the rest. He already knew who might be among those hostages. That night, he sat in his quarters, staring at the blinking cursor of an unsent message to Mara. He wanted to warn her, but anything he sent could be intercepted. And if she had already moved closer to the inner colonies, maybe she was safe, or maybe he was already too late. His hand hovered over the comms controls, but then a thought cut through the noise. Humanity didn't win by waiting for permission. They won by acting when it mattered most. Within hours, the Aegis Dawn was in motion again. The crew didn't question it. They trusted him. The ship slipped into deep space, its cloak shimmering invisibly, engines burning toward the Centauri sector. Along the way, Elias couldn't stop thinking about Mara's last words. It had been 3 months since Mara's last transmission, the one where she said she was moving closer to home. Elias checked his comms every day, hoping for an update. Nothing came. She hadn't said which colony she'd chosen. She hadn't said how soon she would leave. All Elias knew was that she was somewhere out there, between the Centauri cluster and the inner colonies, crossing light years of space toward a place he could finally visit without breaking every rule. But until she arrived, she was still far away. The Aegis Dawn had been quiet since their last mission. The crew kept the ship running, but there had been no orders, no threats, nothing that demanded the kind of power the Aegis could unleash. For most of the crew, the lull was a gift. For Elias, it was a waiting room. He replayed her last rescue. In his mind, the relief in her voice when she realized it was him, the determination when she said she was moving closer. That hope kept him going, but the silence since then made the days feel heavy. Finally, one morning, his wrist come lit. Up with a new message. The sender's name hit him like a jolt. Mara Chundat. He opened it instantly. "Elias, I made it," her voice said, full of quiet relief. "I'm on New Carthage now, one of the inner colonies. It's different here, safer, but busy. I have a small place near the starport. I'd love to see you when you can. No rush, I know you're busy. But it would be good to talk in person again." The message ended there, but it was enough. She had made the first step. Elias almost replied immediately, but the truth stopped. He couldn't just hop on a civilian transport and go to New Carthage. Every movement of the Aegis Dawn was controlled by high command. Even visiting a friendly colony had to be approved, and explaining why the captain of a top-secret ship wanted shore leave wasn't simple. Still, the idea of being in the same system as Mara for the first time in years burned in his mind. Before he could decide how to approach command, the galaxy made the decision for him. A week later, reports came in that New Carthage's council was in crisis. A foreign delegation, not Vieric, but one of their rivals, had arrived to pressure the colony into signing a protection agreement. Everyone knew what that meant. Control disguised as safety. Fleet Command ordered the Aegis Dawn to stand by in case tensions turned hostile. They didn't want to send the Aegis openly, unless the situation became dangerous. But Elias knew how quickly such standoffs could spiral, and Mara was right in the middle of it. The Aegis Dawn slipped into orbit around a moon near New Carthage, cloaked from every scanner. From here, Elias could monitor the colony's broadcasts. Negotiations were breaking down. The foreign delegation claimed New Carthage's defenses were too weak to stand alone, that they needed superior protection. It was the same story humanity had heard countless empires before. A softer version of the Vieric's arrogance, but just as dangerous. Elias listened to the broadcasts late into the night until a particular name caught his attention. Mara Chun, research consultant, addressed the council today with a statement. Opposing the treaty, he froze. She wasn't just living there. She was involved. Her speech played across the channel. "I've seen what humanity can do," she told the council. "We don't need to hide under someone else's shield. We need to believe in our own strength. If we give that up, we've already lost." Elias felt a surge of pride and worry. Speaking out so publicly would make her a target if the situation turned ugly. That evening, a private, encrypted signal came in. It was Mara. "I don't know if you're anywhere near here," she began, "but I thought you should know things are tense. There have been protests outside the council hall. I'm fine, but—" She hesitated, looking away for a moment. "Sometimes I wish I could just walk out and find you here. Everything feels safer when you're around." He almost broke orders then and there. The Aegis could appear in orbit in seconds, send every foreign ship running before they even knew what hit them. But the Aegis wasn't meant for political theater. It was humanity's last defense, not a show of force. Still, he couldn't ignore her words. The next day, the situation erupted. A crowd gathered outside the council hall, shouting at the foreign delegates to leave. Suddenly, a burst of energy fire lit up the plaza. No one knew who fired first, but panic spread instantly. From the Aegis's hidden position, Elias saw the foreign fleet's weapons come online. They weren't attacking yet, just showing readiness. But readiness could become aggression. In seconds, cloak down, Elias ordered quietly. The Aegis Dawn emerged from the moon's shadow like a ghost. Sensors in orbit went wild. Every foreign ship locked on to the sudden presence, and then went silent as their readings came back. They didn't know what they were looking at, only that it was far beyond their own power. A single broad-frequency transmission left the Aegis. This colony is under the protection of the Terran fleet. Any hostile action will be met in kind. That was all it took. The foreign fleet powered down its weapons and began withdrawing from orbit. The Aegis cloaked again and slipped back into the dark before most of the colony even knew it had been there. That night, Elias received another private message from Mara. She didn't mention the mysterious ship in orbit. Maybe she didn't know. But she did say this: the delegates left. The colony's safe. I don't know why, but it felt like someone was watching over us. Anyway, I'd still like to see you. Soon. Elias smiled faintly, leaning back in his chair. She didn't know it, but he had been there. Not just as a protector of humanity, but as someone who had never stopped. Caring no matter the distance. The galaxy still underestimated humanity. That was fine. Sometimes, being underestimated was the best way to protect what mattered. And one day soon, he promised himself, the distance between him and Mara would be gone. The Aegis Dawn had been ordered to stay near New Carthage for 2 more weeks, just in case a foreign delegation tried something again. Elias didn't mind. It was the closest he had been to Mara in years. But closeness in space wasn't the same as closeness in life. She was down there, walking the streets, meeting people, building a new chapter for herself. He was up here, orbiting silently, never revealing who he was or what ship he commanded. It was like being in the same room as someone you love, but separated by a wall of glass. He thought about sending her a message, something casual, something that wouldn't break protocols. But every time he drafted one, it felt wrong, too short, too forced, too obvious that he wanted to say more than he could. Mara had been brave during the council crisis. She had stood up in front of powerful strangers and spoken for humanity's right to stand on its own. That was HFY at its core, the belief that humans could shape their own fate. Elias wanted to tell her how proud he was, but the words stayed in his chest. 3 nights later, a coded alert came in. A smaller ship had entered New Carthage's airspace without clearance. It wasn't foreign military, but it was armed, and moving fast toward the colony's main city. The Aegis tracked it until it disappeared into the atmosphere. Elias knew better than to wait for orders. Prep Shuttle 2, he told the hangar chief. Low profile. Minutes later, he was dropping through the clouds in a sleek, unmarked transport. The Aegis could level fleets, but sometimes the most important missions required a quieter approach. He touched down outside the city under the cover of night. From here, he could move in without drawing attention. He didn't know exactly why. He was here. Maybe it was just a commander's instinct to check the ground himself. But part of him knew the truth. Mara was somewhere in that city, and trouble had a way of finding her. The streets were still. New Carthage's architecture was clean and bright, with wide walkways and hanging gardens lit by soft blue lamps. But in the distance, Elias heard shouts, not of celebration, but fear. He followed the sound to a plaza, where a crowd had gathered around the armed ship's crew. There were only 4 of them, but they carried themselves like they owned the place. One of them was holding Mara by the arm. Elias' blood turned cold. She wasn't hurt, but she was resisting, pulling back even as the man holding her barked. Something about protection taxes. It was the same lie dressed in new words. Another group trying to leech power from a young colony. Elias stepped forward, calm but deliberate. Let her go. The crew turned toward him. The leader smirked. "And who's going to make us?" Elias didn't answer. He simply held the man's gaze until the air between them felt heavy. Humans didn't have claws or fangs or the size of some alien species, but they had something else. A presence born from facing extinction and choosing to fight anyway. Man's smirk faded. He shoved Mara toward him. "Fine, take her. But this colony's going to learn who's in charge soon." They retreated to their ship and lifted off. Elias knew the Aegis would already be tracking them, making sure they didn't come back. For now, he focused on Mara. She stared at him for a moment, eyes wide. "Elias? How?" "I thought you were—" She stopped, glancing around. "I thought you were a long way from here." He smiled faintly. "Guess I was closer than you thought." They found a quiet place near the edge of the plaza. She sat on a low wall, looking at him like she was still catching up to the fact that he was really there. "You came all this way?" she asked softly. He hesitated. "I didn't come for this. My ship was nearby. But I'm glad I was here." She gave him a half smile. "You always show up at the right moment." For a long time, they didn't speak.